Welcome, friends. Today's talk is on concentration and meditation. The Washington, D.C. United Lodge of Theosophists is making presentations online to the extent we can until it is safe to reopen our lodge. Public meetings continue to be suspended due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Please contact us through our website at www.ultdc.org or via other means like our phone number at 301-656-3566. The 19th century theosophical movement that H.P. Blavatsky named Theosophy and transmitted to the world was the most comprehensive and tested message of philosophy, science, and religion ever brought to the world. It shows the path to perfection. It is up to us to assimilate and apply this message through our own self-induced and self-devised methods. It was noted that centuries may go by before we have progressed enough for any messenger to present a more comprehensive message. We follow the ULT Declaration on the back of our program here. The Declaration tells us to work independently and with each other to achieve a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. We hold that the unassailable basis for union among theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching. We have neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers. The sole bond between its associates is the furtherance of unity. We regard as theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and we welcome to our association all those who are in accord with the declared purposes of our declaration and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading is from the Voice of the Silence, starting on page 27. Saith the pupil, O teacher, what shall I do to reach to wisdom? O wise one, what to gain perfection? Search for the paths, but, O Lanu, be of clean heart before thou startest on thy journey. Before thou takest thy first step, learn to discern the real from the false, the ever-fleeting from the everlasting. Learn above all to separate head learning from soul wisdom, the eye from the heart doctrine. Yea, ignorance is like unto a closed and airless vessel, the soul a bird shut up within. It warbles not, nor can it stir a feather, but the songster mute and torpid sits, and of exhaustion dies. But even ignorance is better than head learning with no soul wisdom to illuminate and guide it. The seeds of wisdom cannot sprout and grow in airless space. To live and reap experience, the mind needs breadth and depth and points to draw it toward the diamond soul. Seek not these points in Maya's realm, but soar beyond illusions. Search the eternal and the changeless sought, mistrusting fancies, false suggestions. For mind is like a mirror. It gathers dust while it reflects. It needs the gentle breezes of soul wisdom to brush away the dust of our illusions. Seek, O beginner, to blend thy mind and soul. Shun ignorance, and likewise shun illusion. Avert thy face from the world deceptions. Mistrust thy senses, they are false. But within thy body, the shrine of thy sensations, seek in the impersonal for the eternal man. And having sought him out, look inward, thou art Buddha. And now for today's talk.
Welcome, friends. This talk about meditation, concentration and meditation occupies everyone's attention, and it is a significant subject. And of course, you all know that we're dealing with the mind and also the will. The mind is a name given to the sum of the states of consciousness grouped under thought, will, and feeling. And you can find that statement in the Secret Doctrine on page 38, Secret Doctrine 1, page 38. Mr. Judge, in his writings, gives us hints in all different articles. And in the Gita, he tells us that certain prerequisites are necessary for one to be successful in this endeavor. One of them is undertaking duty. What ought I to do? This is a very necessary process, because the actions to be performed have to be decided upon, because every day certain situations arise and requests to do different tasks are presented to us. But we're told that we're not to do everything that comes in front of us, that we have to cultivate that discrimination that actually enables us to choose correctly as to what is it that we need to do and what is it that we are to leave out. As Theosophists, we really do have difficulty in deciding what tasks are to be done. And of course, in all the writings, we're also told not to be attached to the end result. But in many situations, when tasks come to us, we know what the end result is going to be, but that is no reason to make our decision as to whether we're going to do it or not. We are to do it and keep the mind unattached to the result. And in this way, the true practice for the preparation of meditation is begun, and eventually it does become permanent, especially if we are watching our thoughts and acts and performing them according to what our discriminative powers are telling us. It is stated that looking at a spot on the wall, or leaving the mind empty in a vacuous mental state is not the correct way to approach it, because that actually leads to sleep. meditation is an active participation of trying to control the mind. It requires thought and mental effort, and it requires persistently following it with faith. Now, Mr. Judge, in his writings, tells us to look at meditation in two different ways. He divides it into two. One, he says, is meditation that we undertake by sitting in a quiet room that we choose, and we're going to bring in front of the mind a particular subject or object to meditate upon. And this is what gives people difficulty, and we'll discuss it. But the other is a lifetime meditation. In other words, what is the heart set on? It is practiced just about by everybody, whether we are a philosopher, a mystic, a saint, criminal, artist, or merchant. It never leaves the domination that it has over the heart, and we follow it. Some of us, of course, are bent on acquiring wealth, position, power, and that is not the correct outcome that we would expect from it. So, what is it that we're looking for? We're looking for a continuous effort without relaxing it to realize what the heart is set on. In this case, what is it that we're after? In this philosophy, it's the truth. In this philosophy, it is the truth. So, if we desire to reach the truth, then we have to follow our heart's desire, which is going to lead us to the finding out of the truth. What about concentration? Mr. Judge also divides the concentration into two parts, and he tells us that a lot of people think we're going to learn to concentrate very quickly, but that this also requires dedication and time and effort for the end result to be what it is that we wish it to be. One of them, he says, is an acquired power that we use on a fixed occasion, but the other one is deep and constantly practiced, and it is a power that we have made a possession. So concentration then is not memory, and when we sit for concentration, the human mind and its associative part of memory is awakened, and it brings in front of us recollections of all sorts of affairs, thoughts, and impressions from the past. Of course, this drives away the great object that we had selected for our concentration, and it ends it right there. So, Mr. Judge says this is a natural tendency of the human mind, and that this is what we are to overcome. And this will not occur very quickly. We have to address the trouble by practicing, by diligence, perseverance, and continuance with the effort. And so he's telling us to try and try again and again and again. So it is not going to be an easy task. It is a task that requires continued effort. Now, in this effort, the will also is necessary. We all heard the statement behind desire, behind will stands desire. So, if we want to get to the truth, we have to limit our desires to the finding out of the truth. And we see that a child, lunatic, a savage, they all have this will, and their will is very concentrated and very strong. When it comes to us, our desires are extensive, and we scatter our energy in that way. To make our will strong, we must have fewer desires, and these have to be high, pure, and altruistic. As we know, will exists everywhere. It's a universal power that exists. And of course, we have our own will, and we need to use it for meditation and concentration. If we want the truth with that same intensity for achieving success, accumulating money, and possessions, we are told that it will work in the same way. And we are advised to take our effort seriously and continue on with it. Yoga then, which is concentration, is placing the highest ideal before ourselves and continuously striving to rise up to it. So true concentration then deals with the inner world of noumena and not the outer shell of phenomena. And there is another requisite for this effort, and it is purity of heart. We all know that the Zoroastrian philosophy is based on purity, which is ashoy. And this purity of thought, word, and deed are essentials for ordinary mortals if we are to rise above ordinary levels of living. So for this reason, we also have to cultivate an unselfish philanthropy, which is necessary in order to find out the true path. In the Voice of the Silence, the paramitas, the transcendental virtues are listed, and the first is dana, which is love and charity. One of the masters states that if we continue on limiting our desires and continue on with this unselfish philanthropy, eventually our individual personal feelings, blood ties, friendships, our patriotism and race predilection will all give way and become blended into one universal feeling, which is the only true and holy, the only unselfish, eternal love. And this immense love for humanity has to be felt as a whole. So from this, it is evident that meditation, true meditation, consists in the reasoning from the known to the unknown. The known, of course, is the phenomenal world, cognizable by our five senses. And all that we see in this manifested world, of course, are the effects, the causes are always hidden in the noumenal, the unmanifested, unknown world. So this has to be accomplished by meditation. In other words, continued attention to the subject. Occultism recommends that we employ both the deductive and the inductive methods. The deductive is from general to particular. And the axioms listed in the Secret Doctrine become useful in this respect because they're general statements, and we can start from there and learn it, and when we put it in, it has a way of germinating in ourselves and becoming more clear as we continue on with this meditative process. So we are comprehending axioms and employing this process to learn them. So then we have to use the opposite, which is the inductive method, going from particulars to generals. In other words, we are starting from the known to the unknown. This process then constitutes the true contemplation. This deductive and inductive method then constitutes true contemplation, going from generals to particulars first, and then using our reasoning powers and what we have learned to find out whether the particulars support the general axioms. This process, if continued with, places our inner capacities in front of us. We know what it is we need to do to develop them. And if we read in Culture of Concentration and also Elixir of Life, we know that we have to develop our inner nature, the astral. The astral body is electromagnetic. It has all our emotions in it. It is a strength, it's a strength, and tensile strength is very extensive, and it is this that we have to learn also to use. Mr. Judge, in his Culture of Concentration, states that a person who does not sit for meditation, who does not follow the contemplative methodology, will not be able to cultivate separation of the astral from the physical, which is a necessary process. We need to read the article. It is too long to go into it here, but it is in two parts, and he tells us what qualities we should develop and what negative qualities we have, such as anger, fear, vanity, these we need to get rid of. And it is important to understand that even though we might not think that we have these qualities, nevertheless, if they exist in our nation, they also exist as germs in us. And when the right conditions arise, especially in this path that we're trying to follow, they will germinate and grow without our realization. So it is important to get rid of them at the beginning of the effort so that they won't come to bother us later on. In Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms, this little book it is put in front of sincere students of Theosophy in order to assist us and help us in moving in the direction that we need to go. It helps us in concentrating our mind. And in the first book, which its title is Concentration, and it says that concentration or yoga is the hindering of the modifications of the thinking principle. In other words, our mind has a tendency to go toward diffuseness. So yoga or concentration is the process by which we're going to learn to concentrate the mind on one object or subject and to keep it there as long as necessary so that we can look into it and understand its inner qualities. Eventually, this is where we want to go. So, in order to learn to uphold the mind on one object or subject, we have to remove the diffuseness from the mind and make it one pointed. We have to make it one pointed. The mind then is modified by what comes in front of it, and it transforms itself into that subject or object. And in this philosophy, we're told that the soul then follows where the mind goes. So here is one of the concepts that we don't have to discuss, because the soul is in charge of the mind. In other words, the mind is a tool of the soul, and it uses it through the brain, which is a tool of the mind, to get information from the environment, and uses the five senses to collect it, and then it becomes synthesized by the mind into one, and then the soul is looking at it from its own perception. In other words, it's the soul that is using that information. So how do we then learn to concentrate the mind? Well, we just described it by persistent diligence and trying there is no other way we can train it but actually doing it. We can do all the talking about it, but it will not give the end result. The one pointedness in the book is called ekagrata. Now, in the second chapter, or the second book, we have means of concentration. In book 3, we are concentrating on dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, which is concentration, contemplation, and meditation. And these 3 constitute sanyama. There is no equivalent word for sanyama in English. In book 4, the essential nature of isolation is presented. But we need to concentrate on the first part of the book, book 1, and actually learn it. We cannot move into the other books without totally having this first book under our control. Because the modifications of the mind, which are of 5 kinds, and they are listed on page 4. Correct cognition, misconception, fancy, sleep, and memory need to be understood, and our diffuseness controlled. And we are told that hindering of these modifications, which is learning to control them, is to be effected by exercise and dispassion. Exercise is what we just described. We every day, if at all possible, every day at a regular time, we learn to meditate and keep the mind on one particular object or subject as long as we wish it to be. At first, it will not happen because that diffuseness is there, and it will jump from one object to another object, from one object to subject, and if we leave the mind empty, then it goes towards sleep. So, if we take this exercise seriously and observe it, it will eventually quieten our mind. And we have to have also dispassion in overcoming our desires, because that also keeps us from concentration. In this way, we will eventually quieten the mind. Now, we just said mind, but we have in the past described the function of the mind as twofold. In this process, then, we're talking about the intellectual mind, because that is the one that has that diffuseness tendency, and it moves quickly from one subject, object, and object to object, so forth. That is its natural tendency, and modification of that tendency is what we are undertaking, and we're calling it concentration. In time, we will obtain perfect concentration, and by using perfect concentration to hold the mind on one object and subject, we will also learn contemplation. We gave an opportunity for students to learn contemplation, which is concentration on the noumena, not the phenomena. The noumena is a very difficult condition to reach, but eventually we will do so. And for that, we have to cultivate our inner senses. in this process, what we call the higher mind comes to the aid of the lower mind, and it slowly raises it up. The lower mind is not able to do it by itself. It is intellectual. The lower mind works on this plane, but the higher mind is not of this plane. So it's a spiritual cultivation that we're after, because we are talking about higher levels of consciousness here, and the lower mind cannot reach up to those levels. It's the higher mind that pulls it up. So this is how we are to approach it. Another statement made is that for the student to comprehend the noumenal, he must identify himself with nature. He must not look at himself as an isolated being, but rather as a part of the integral whole. So we have to look at ourselves as part of the integral whole. In the unmanifested world, it can be clearly perceived that all is controlled by the law of affinity. Law of affinity. In other words, attraction of one for the other. In those regions, everything is based on infinite love in its true sense. In other words, that infinite love is unconditional. It is there for all. And when we can assume that position, that we are part of that whole, and we can do that philanthropy from this basis, it is altruistic, and it enables us to have the knowledge that goes with that power. We will then know how to do it and when to do it. So not gaining this knowledge in this process of being able to look at things as they are rather than as they appear gives us that clarity of the mind, and then we can use that knowledge effectively. It is stated that in the future, neither one nor the other, in other words, knowledge without power and power without knowledge will not work. We're going to require both of them. So then, in this process, when we reach to the truth, it's written in the Gita, it is like lighting up in us of the Supreme One, who then becomes visible. Let us meditate on that which in us is the higher self, concentrate upon it, and have the will to work for it as dwelling in every human heart.